Hey guys, and welcome back to the Renaissance Room podcast. And I am honestly so excited. I finally got my Substack page up and running. It's not really running quite yet. I don't know why I said running, but I created a profile and I'm really looking forward to creating on Substack and having a newsletter. Currently, I just finished cooking dinner. I made some fried white meat pork chops with some yellow rice and green beans. It's quite literally one of my favorites. I love anything crispy and I love a good Spanish rice. Okay, so I was really craving that, and green beans are just my forte. But let me not get too gassed. I'm a little nervous. I've kind of noticed that about myself lately. Like sometimes when I get nervous, I may exaggerate or so I'm like, let me just calm down. I'm excited to kind of record this podcast. And in today's episode, what we're going to be talking about is the importance of education, but in terms of education as it pertains to relationships and specifically women in relationships. So I really grew up around a lot of women who you might consider weak, right? And I probably would consider weak as well. And that's just more so a more simplistic, cutthroat way of explaining everything I'm going to be breaking down today. Because, talk about weakness. Weakness is really like a blind spot. Weakness is really like not knowing certain things, right? Weak could be your writing skills are weak, right? You're not strong in this area. And that's what I seen growing up, especially as it pertains to heterosexual relationships. Every woman that I knew, and that was in proxy to me, and it is still in proxy to me, right? A lot of my elders were in abusive relationships. I love how, Bell Hooks talks about this in her book, Salvation. She talks about Lorraine Hansberry in her just sharing her experience about how every woman that she had known in her life had experienced, right, abuse at the hands of a man, right? Because back in the day, it was actually pretty normalized. Domestic violence was not something that was categorized as a illegal crime until 1994. So you have to think crack epidemic, alcoholism, right? You got liquor stores popping up on every corner. The kind of like the removal, I guess you'll say, of like industrialism, like a lot of things taking place, the rise of hip hop, right? The rise of criminality and gun violence and all these different things. And then you have the Black woman who's in this very treacherous community. So it was very normalized for women to be abused and for people to see women be beat up on every single day. Like that was just normal. And when I look at my life and I realize that for so many women, it's just normal. I literally watched a relative tell a younger relative to stay with her husband who was abusing her, quite literally abusing her. And she justified it. She said, he's probably just going through something. He's probably just having a hard time, right? One of the things that I love about being born in such a time as this, and one of the things that I really admire about my generation and the younger generations of women, is that we really have we really have developed and we really have garnered a sense of personal agency. We understand that we have something to say regardless if a man is present or not, right? I began to question what it was about some women that have nothing to say, right, concerning any other topic in their life, concerning a politic, concerning their favorite, hobbies, right, concerning anything about themselves, right? But they have so much to say when a man shows up in their lives, right? These women become philosophers. And I think what's really unfortunate is that we've had to draw such a line in the sand between us versus them, because these women really are a huge detriment to the sisterhood collective, right? And it's crazy because it's like you don't really want to say that, and you don't want these women to feel some type of way because they're hurting and they're broken. But at the same time, it does kind of feel like us versus them a lot of times, because these women were willing to protect men and protect the male ego and protect masculinity at the hands of women. And it was so destructive, and it was very contradictory. And it went against everything that was sisterhood, right? And it went against everything that was women's rights. I'm always deeply grieved when I listen to a lot of the older women around me and my family talk, because you realize just how ignorant they are, right? And not just ignorant in terms of their lack of education, but just in terms of like their lack of awareness and education in terms of abuse. There are so many women who are just, hey, if it's not, you're in the ER, then it's not enough. And honestly, I realize that it's not just my family, right? I don't like to talk about celebrities, but for the sake of this video, when the video aired with Cassie, I was really shocked to see so many women who were still like, that wasn't enough. Right? Like still supporting Diddy, still, questioning things, still needing more proof. Right? And in my own life, I've come to the realization that there are some women who will defend men regardless. Right? And what I mean by that is like, there'll never be enough proof. Right? You will never have enough evidence for these women to really call it what it is. Right? And for these women to really hold men accountable, because for whatever reason, they don't exist without a man, right? And I really grieve these women because it's a waste of life, right? It's a waste of life. It's a waste of potential. And it's really saddening because these are women who have gone through so many relationships, right? So many trials, so many tribulations, series of abuse at the hands of men in their own lives. And yet these women are still out here like little girls, right? Naively professing and believing that men are good, that men are here to protect you and to serve you. And that's not to say that they aren't, right? I don't want to jump around, but you guys know that I always tell you, I do think socioeconomically, right? Classism plays a huge role in terms of whether or not you're going to have a healthy partner, right? Obviously, there's a lot of nuance there. So let's not take that too literal. That's not a general statement, right? There are a lot of things that play a huge role, but we talk about the average person who's educated, who, has stability, who, who's on average, those relationships are actually pretty equal, right? You're actually not going to be dealing with someone who is seeking to destroy you, and someone who views you as prey, and someone who is a lot more predatory, right? It's when you're at the bottom here, and the vast majority of us are, right? We're working, we're trying to get to a better place. I think this is obviously why women are heavily encouraging education, and I tell that for younger women as well, right? Because you're dealing with a completely different dynamic. Right? You're dealing with so many men who are quite literal predators, right? You're dealing with people who are dealing with all kind of issues. I mean, mental health issues, psychological issues, just in their thinking, right? You're dealing with a lot of people who don't know better and will never do better, right? Because education is not a priority for them, right? These are the people who say things like college doesn't matter, right? These are the people who shun you for wanting to get out of the ghetto and wanting to get out of poverty, right? And that is the vast majority of us. And it's so unfortunate because, we all come online and we're on social media as Black people, and we are mixed with we are integrated with others from a different socioeconomic background, but at the same time, it's like, that's not the vast majority of us, right? I would actually venture to say maybe like 75% of us are still, down here at the bottom, dealing with all this craziness, all these crazy people. And it doesn't help because you have these older women who are in your life who are encouraging you to make really poor decisions. And it's quite literally repulsive, right? And it's sad because these are women who are not educated on abuse, and they don't have any plans to be educated on abuse. So this is a really quick podcast because I'm getting ready to enjoy my dinner, but I just wanted to come on here and let you guys know, because I feel like, women in the 4B movement, these things did not spark just to have something to do, just to have something to say, right? When I'm on TikTok, and yeah, we could talk about the algorithm, but when I find myself listening to women and their experiences with men, I don't take it lightly, right? This is not even an epidemic. This is just the reality on average, right? And I'm deeply, deeply concerned. I'm deeply concerned because nobody is listening to women. Women were at a point where they had no choice but to decenter men because they needed to prioritize their safety, right? I just told you. The thing with Cassie and even still people, because here's the thing, right? We can all profess, right? Maybe people you know, right? People you may see on the street, whatever. You take a survey, okay, whatever, right? People may profess that Diddy is wrong, but when you go to this person's Instagram page, when you see who's following this person, and not like from a follower standpoint, but more so like you'll click a photo, most recent photo, and there's thousands of likes. Not even, you know what I mean? It's like, this is the problem because there's a lot of people who are on that side who just aren't getting it. There are a lot of people who are telling women to be quiet. And then the sad thing about this is that there are so many other women who are doing the same. And they have no idea, like, wisdom will tell you, you are not above anything. You know what I mean? To my married women, to my sister girls. Okay. You are not above being abused. Right. I don't know what it is. Obviously we can talk about patriarchy and misogyny, but you have to understand that there is nothing that any woman would do or could do that would warrant her to be abused. Right. A lot of younger women believe that if they could just become more aesthetically appeasing, right, if they can just buy into some kind of beauty standard, they can become more feminine, if they can, keep themselves together or whatever the case may be, then that would excuse them from abuse, because that's really what the root is. Right. They believe that they're not good enough. They're not beautiful enough. When the sad truth is that it was never about beauty. Right. And I'm going to insert a Tyler Perry clip because Diary of a Mad Black Woman. And as I get older and I dissect film and I start to really engage in film from like a real world critical perspective, I think that it exemplifies this so perfectly. Right. This is the perfect demonstration. Right. And everyone's always like, on TikTok, they're using that sound and they're like, Christina's gone, but it's true, because here's the thing, right? Like, you have to understand in that clip where she, after 18 years, she's just kicked out of her house or whatever. This is the reality, right? Like, you aren't a more better woman than her. You know what I mean? Because you look good, right? And that's what the mistress was saying. She was like, oh, I know how to keep my man. She keeps herself up, right? She's got this new closet full of Dior, right? That's what the girls are kind of buying into, right? It's a matter of being slim, if I can be light enough, right? I've seen some content creators go from one shade to a few shades lighter, right? I'm seeing a lot of women, really tap into not fitness, but more so like wanting to be slimmer. Although we can talk about the body dysmorphia and how I really saw that on the rise when I was in the gym. Like, this is around 2021 where fitness became such a popular thing. And there were a lot of fitness content creators, a lot of gurus. This is when the protein powders, all these different brands, vegan protein powders, and all this stuff really started to rev up, right? Because it always existed, but it was more so in the context of like bodybuilders. You know what I mean? Like, they were the ones who were at, what is it? Is it GE? Is that the place? GE, GM. They were at the place where they were really pushing the powders and all those different supplements, right? But today, that's everybody, right? And I started to notice, I was working out, I was trying to find a medium that worked for me because I value health and fitness. But I was trying to find a medium that works for me. And I was like, well, just trying different things. But I noticed being in the gym, just taking a look around, that everybody was working out so hard. And what I really garnered from that and just the energy and just everything in there intuitively, I was like, wow, we're dealing with like a body dysmorphia. And it really hit me too, because at the time I was dating someone who was really obsessed about his looks. He was a pretty skinny guy, and he just became really obsessive to the point where it was like self-hate, but he wouldn't admit that to himself, of course, but he did oftentimes project those things onto me. And as someone who has always been fit, I guess you'll say, and maybe skinny, rather, and who has been categorized as fit because I'm naturally slim. I never really struggled with body dysmorphia. Being younger, I had certain insecurities because I was bullied, right? There's a whole different experience of just being a slim Black girl on top of being nerdy. Yeah, it's different. But nonetheless, I had never struggled with how I looked. You know what I mean? Like, I was never insecure about that. So anyway, it was also new to me, but I realized that we were on the rise of that. But yeah, so back to what I was saying, you have women who are believing that if they can just become lighter, thinner, and this has obviously always been a thing, but that's kind of what's under a lot of these movements that encourage women to look good, right? It's not for you, because most women typically feel pretty good in some jeans, a hoodie, you know what I mean? Natural hair. It's easier. Like, you know what I mean? Whatever. Right. And there are some women who don't. And this is definitely not to generalize or to conclude on anything. But I'm saying this to say, yes, it feels good to feel beautiful and all those different things, but there's a hidden motive here. And so I can't even think of his mistress name in the movie. I can't even think of either of the characters, but everybody on here who's listening, you've seen Diary of a Mad Black Woman by by Tyler Perry. So anyway, so women were adopting this belief that, women who argue with other women and say that it's women and they're the problem and things like that, when women talk about abuse or the experiences that they've had, or they share with other women, hey, if you're in a relationship, that's great, but just make sure that you're still self-sufficient, X, Y, and Z, right? These women are called bitter, difficult, angry, all those different things. It's because the women who shame them, right? The women who feel like they're so much better because they have a man, they've partnered or whatever, and they think they're above it. It's because they think that it's something wrong with the women. And I tell people all the time, listen, honey, you have to understand there is wisdom in understanding that you can never control what somebody else does to you, right? You can never control the actions of someone else, right? You can set boundaries. You can do all those things. You can stick up for yourself. You can do all those things. But if someone decides today, I'm going to steal your purse, right? Then that's what they're going to do. And you are never responsible for that. And I think that's the thing. And it's unfortunate because as much as we are in this space now where we're having these collective conscious conversations, I think we still have a very long way to go, because it is this psychology and these paradigms that are so deeply woven into the female psyche, right? And that is why we see women who leave men and we have we cannot possibly build a support system around her, right? I think about Tia Mowry, for example, right? Recently divorced, said that she was leaving her husband of however many years because pretty much, he's been here this whole time and he's never had a job, right? And what is the first thing women say? Well, why did you choose him? Right. And it really disgusts me because I think that we wonder why men are weak, why women aren't partnering with men, why women feel repulsed by some men, right? Why women are choosing to forego relationships with men because they're not getting anything from them. And you know why? Because men don't have to show up and do anything, right? Men can just show up because their presence, the patriarchal status that you then acquire from having a man, that is power, baby. That is social capital, right? These men don't have to do anything. They don't have to be a better man. They don't have to possibly change and heal and develop themselves to become partners, right? Or to, for the betterment of the relationship, right? Women are required to do that. And the crazy thing is, those are the women who will. It's not a matter of giving up your body too soon or, these women are the ones who dress this way and that's why we can't. No, no. It's the fact that in American society, and not even just in American, in the world, right? Men don't have to be anything. They're entitled. Okay. When James Brown said this is a man's world, I don't think we understood the impact, the influence, and the truth telling of his artistry. Okay. That was the truth. Why do you think women are fighting so hard? And women aren't ungrateful. What are you talking about? Right. And it's a sad thing because here's the truth behind every woman who comes online and who builds an entire brand that really prefaces on teaching women how to be better wives or how to get a man. Right. And it's under the guise of sisterhood and empowerment. But mind you, right, I just said that these women don't have anything to say about anything else. Right. You ask them their opinion about anything else. They don't have one. But because they have a man, now they have something to say, right? These women have nothing to say any other time. We wouldn't even know they exist. But now that they have a man, they have something to say. It's crazy. So what's under the guise of all of this, and what you'll actually find if you actually really listen to these women who have such strong gun-ho beliefs about women and what women should be doing, and they're so cruel towards women, and they're so insensitive, and there's never enough proof for them to call an abuser, and they'll never have empathy for women who experience just the shortcomings, right, that sometimes can happen from being in heterosexual relationships. You're going to find that these women have been abused, and it is so normal for them that you leaving over a comment, right? You getting up because you decided you don't want to pay your half of the first date. You know what I mean? Like, these women, they don't believe that they are worthy of nothing. And I think the thing that brings about a great sense of grievance to me is that so many of these women are Black. It's not a matter of, oh, this is how we dress. No, it's not that. Men actually like that. Men kind of like slutty things. I know a lot of times women think that you have to be, a saint, or you have to be so perfect. You know what I mean? You have to be the good girl to get the guy. No, that's not it. Right? It's not that. It's not. Men aren't really complaining over that. Quite frankly, that's not really the argument. Right? Like, that's not what it is. The truth is that so many of us think we are worth nothing. We think we are worth nothing. We are quite literally willing to coddle, raise, and build a man up. And so how dare a woman come in and say that we deserve better when I think I am worthy of nothing? I can't even fix my lips, right? That's the psychology of these women. They can't even fix their lips to believe that they should even deserve a little bit more, right? And that's the problem. And so what's really unfortunate is that it's these women who plague the minds of future generations to come. Right. I talk about the fallacy of authority and how it's really unfortunate because a lot of older people, because of ageism, feel entitled to wisdom that they just did not acquire over their lives. Right. And so they speak lies into other young women, and then it becomes a perpetual cycle. And then guess what gets repeated? Right. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. There are no good Black men. Right. When the truth is that you were never even set up to even go meet those type of men, right? And I'm not talking about being a wife and going to charm school. No, I'm talking about having a real sense of self, having a sense of autonomy, being authentic, and really loving yourself. It was never set up that way for you. And that's the Black community, and that's the Black woman's experience. And that's what we're dealing with today. And it's incredibly hurtful. For so many of us, but this is really the start of the work. I think we're finally realizing it's not about sex. It's not about sex. It's not about gender pay. Like, let's really take a look at let's take a look at our communities. Let's take a look at the disparities, right, in treatment and in regard. I was going to say in self-regard and personal regard, but let's take a look at the disparities in regard. Right. I say this all the time. Religion preys on women and it preys for men. Right. How many young women and women in general have been let down due to the Christian church? Right. How many people in the church today, still to this day, will turn a blind eye to a man and give him all kinds of benefits of doubt, even if a woman has come out and said, hey, he has done X, Y, and Z. Right. He gets the benefit of the doubt. But her, oh, she is the one who's going to have to pay the price. She is the one who needs to stick it out. She is the one who's going to be then met with the question of, questioning her commitments. You see what I'm saying? But he never is confronted, right? And even when she tries to confront him, they tell her, no, you pray for him. You step aside and you pray for him, right? And it's truly sinister. So I just want to conclude this podcast episode by just saying, like, you guys have to be so careful. You have to be, really educate yourself about abuse, because a lot of times it's happening, and here lately, right? It's so covert that you don't even know. And I'm not telling you to become somebody who is so obsessed, right? Find healing in your life, find healing in your journey, but validate your experiences, right? Understand that you don't want to see the world through rose-colored tinted, glasses. But if that's where you are, that's where you are. That's okay. Your experiences are valid. And a lot of times the reason why it takes the healing a little bit longer is because for so long you've been invalidated and intuitively in what you've been feeling. Right. And because, like I said, it's so covert, there's not really a lot of education on it. Right. So I think a lot of women know, but you don't know. And what's unfortunate is that so many of us have older women around us who are enablers, right? Who are completely compliant, and not because they're jealous. No, they're not jealous. They're ignorant, right? They're uneducated. They don't know any better. This is all they know. I look at so many of the women in my life, just my familial history, my ancestry, and I realized that, man, so many of these women have been abused. It's so normal to them. It's just normal. Like, and I know I'm not the only Black girl this is her life. Like, the abuse is so normalized. Like, it's like they don't even know an existence without it. They don't even know how to be strong in themselves and trust themselves and be courageous and be like, you know what, I'm not taking this off no man. They don't even know what that's like. They don't even know how to stand up with their back straight and their spines aligned, with their crowns held high. They have no idea. And so when they see a younger woman who does that, they're going to say she's haughty, she's prideful, she doesn't know enough, right? There comes that entitlement, right? The fallacy of authority. Here comes that ageism into play, right? Because these women have no idea what an alternative could have ever even looked like. And everybody around her is an enabler for this abusive man, whether overt or covert, right? And no one can really explain what is taking place. And so you have a bunch of women who become bitter and angry and cynical and abusive and aggressive towards their children, towards other women, and they have no idea why. Right? It's the company you keep. You are who you hang around, and you're jealous of the women who's happy, right? And this is where the jealousy comes in, right? Not women who are fronting and faking and just, a lot of people today are really deriving a sense of self-esteem and confidence off of people being jealous of them, right? A lot of people today are really riding in on the whole narcissism thing, where it's like, I'm going to present myself as one way and I want you to envy me, right? Because that then makes me feel good about myself because you're paying me some attention, right? It's very interesting. It's a very interesting dynamic. But for those who are outside of that, this is what it is. So these women are jealous. They're jealous of women who have a sense of agency, who are happy, who are kind of like glowing. And they assume that you had a perfect life. They assume that you've never experienced abuse, right? They assume that it's X, Y, and Z, some factor outside of their own personal control, when it was never that. It was always a matter of personal choice. And when you try to tell them that, they don't want that recipe. Oh, no, they don't want the recipe to that peach cobbler. Girl, no. Right? They want to believe that it's something outside of their control. And this is why we have this idea that women aren't victims, right? Because of this learned sense of helplessness. So I'm going to end there. But please be aware that there are a lot of women who are on the loose here. Okay. And it's incredibly dangerous. And these are women who are definitely very ignorant in terms of abuse. And these are women who are very naive in terms of men and relationships. And they never quite grow up and understand that, hey, we've been sold a fantasy. And it's incredibly difficult. And I completely sympathize, with these women. And I can't even say sympathize, I empathize because I can relate to it, right? Fighting the fairy tale, that could be a whole book in itself, but fighting the fairy tale is a very difficult thing to do because it's there everywhere you turn. Even when I'm on TikTok looking for funny videos or whatever the case may be, right? There it is. There it is. That imagery is one in which we can never escape, right? Unfortunately, it is plastered on every billboard, you know what I mean? So it's so hard to understand that in order to really have love and to have like a healthy relationship, it actually takes more maturity, right? It's hard. It's completely hard. And it's okay if you find yourself in perpetual cycles, right? Because that fairy tale is at the forefront of your mind and you're reminded of it every single time. Okay. It's like a record. It's like a broken record. You just can't really seem to scratch it. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's crazy. It's really crazy. But, you have to understand that it's not real. It's very faux, right? It's not real. And I think it's really only when you get to that place that you can start to kind of heal and develop. But I think we're just at a place too where we're also afraid, right? The lack of mating, things like that. So a lot of times we like to rush the process, but it just doesn't work that way. Right. I think we've come to a place now where, because we're so sold out on convenience, we actually don't know how to get to know people, and I think what's so unfortunate too is that because love can be such a scary thing and partnership can be such a huge risk, we find ourselves seeking advice. And it's just unfortunate that we don't get that from people who are healthy enough to really provide it and to really provide us with a sense of sound wisdom, and model a genuine sense of like personal conduct. So I hope you guys got something from this podcast episode. I really hope that you guys start to educate yourself about the different forms of abuse. And if you're a woman, educate yourself about different abusive men. I think something that's really unfortunate, I talked about this on TikTok, but just kind of talking about how we were living in a world where, no, I'm kidding. We were really living in a society where a lot of men were starting to take on women's psychology. And it was becoming increasingly dangerous because this is the rise of the gaslighting, right? But gaslighting was becoming so normalized. And, it's so funny as I say this, I just had my own personal revelation, right? As a writer, as an author, as someone who was never really considered an artist, I think that this podcast is so timely, right? Because we were living in a world where, let me be serious, but because we were now living in a world where men were starting to take on women's psychology, right? Men were being educated in women's spaces. Men on average lacked education, especially in regards to personal development, character development, emotional regulation, and emotional intelligence, right? There are no male spaces that are teaching men that, right? We clearly see what happens when we give men podcasts, right? It's not typically anything that's very educational, anything that will really help men in their character development, in their emotional development, and all the things that they say that they've lacked, right? So men were coming to women's spaces, and we used to call this emasculation. But what it was today was it was almost like men were putting on, I don't even want to say, and I think this is going to sound so dumb, but it's like men were like putting on women's brains, right? They were sitting in women's spaces, learning from women, healing from women in these communal spaces. And what they were doing was taking on women's experiences. And so what you have today, even though the numbers don't show this, right? Even though just even in your own neighborhood, in your own life, it doesn't show this, right? Men were actually starting to say things like women are abusive, women are hitting men, women. And it was like, they actually start to believe this, right? And it's almost like there is some type of psychological confusion, and there's like a lot of cognitive dissonance because it's like, that's not your experience. You've never seen that. You've never experienced that. You've never witnessed that. And it's not true, right? And so you have to be so careful. And I think this is why it's so important, right? Because you know what that is, right? That then turns into gaslighting, right? So now you're with men who are confused because he just listened to this podcast about, from this woman and that woman. And so he's been indoctrinated. I don't want to say indoctrinated because but he's been educated by women. And so he starts to think that he can relate to these experiences with these mismanaged emotions, right? He's trying to find a place to allocate those, right? Maybe he does want to heal, but he's not going about it in a way that is healthy, right? He's not going about it in a way that is conducive or productive for his issues as a man, right? And for the male psyche. So he has a lot of things that are not being allocated to the proper place. And so what he then starts to do is that he gets in relationships with women, and now it's his feelings that he's prioritizing, even if he doesn't understand those feelings. And so he's saying things like, you're abusing me, you're using me. He has no idea that he's so out of context, right? And that's because he's been listening to a lot of different women podcasts and women's spaces and things like that. And so men are taking on women's psychology. That then is going to turn to a lot of gaslighting. And so this is why I think it's so timely that I'm making this podcast, because it's important for you guys to know this so that you can start to, again, educate yourselves about the many different ways of overt covert abuse, right? And I also think this is important too, why you should continue to work on yourself and put yourself in better environments so that you can be around people who are also healthy and educated, right? Nobody has to have a perfect family. I don't think anybody's getting out of America without some trauma. I don't think anybody's coming up in America without some trauma. But at the end of the day, when we become adults, we become responsible for ourselves, right? We heal, we have better access to resources, to things like mental health education. We have therapists, we have, all these different ways that we can really, heal and be better humans, right? So it's important that you continue to work on yourself so that you will no longer be a part of that majority. And I hate to say that, because I feel like there was a bit of insensitivity there, and we could talk about consciousness and communal efforts on another pod. But for the sake of this episode, please, please, please educate yourself about abuse. If you don't have anyone around you who can validate you, journal, keep to yourself, and please be courageous, right? This is your life. This is nothing to play with. This is very serious, and the thing about abuse and abusers, when there's a lack of education, the people are not enlightened, right? So it does not get better. Love you guys. Peace.